We left off yesterday um, at John, the second chapter, first verse. We're getting ready to get into the marriage uh, ceremony in Cana in the New Testament. The very first miracle that Jesus or Yeshua performed, and it's uh, pregnant with meaning and depth. Uh, and it's going to lead us into a portion that is going to be very controversial and very enlightening at the same time. So we're going to really test how well we are shedding this former programming and conditioning now, see, relative to um, scientific perceptual social engineering and the old paradigm. So what we're going to have to realize is that in order to have a proper understanding and comprehension of anything in the Bible, we have to realize that the Bible is not the primary source. The biblical stories and allegories are based on myths and legends and allegories that preceded it by thousands of years. Uh, Now, see, this programming that we've all been affected by and influenced by causes us to be, among other things, creatures of the moment. Creatures of the moment. So whatever uh, conceptions or whatever doctrines or traditions are prevalent in that particular time period, we have a tendency to get stuck in those things and not look back far enough, which is proper research, to find a an early or the earliest, if possible, example or source relative to the subject or subjects that we are discussing. So
Yeah, I agree.
go ahead.
No, I say I agree.
Yeah.
Me
So
too.
in order to understand all of the elements, and we've been covering these symbols, all of these elemental symbols, in order to understand these symbols as they are utilized in, particularly John, the second chapter, as it relates to the marriage of Cana and the turning of the water into wine. We got to go back to the earliest uh, template. Now, see, the earliest pattern relative to allegory
Speaker Eitai.
and mythology.
Eitai, do you have anything on the
Yeah,
screen?
I'm putting it up now. Thanks.
Oh, okay. All right.
So, John, the second chapter reads on first verse, and the third day there was a marriage in Cana. So, that number three, the third day, very important, as well as the name Cana. All right. It's related to the name Kana or the word Kana or the word Canaan in the Old Testament. And Cana um, in the Hebrew is translated in English as a reed, a stalk, a bone, a tube, a shaft, a measuring rod. So write down the word measuring rod, and write down, if you're taking notes, the word reed. All right. This is full of deep symbolism. Almost every word in here, every caricature that is presented here, every allegorical character, this is loaded with symbolism. And this is the initial verse in this tale of changing of the water into wine. And we're going to really spend all of our time period today breaking this down, because this is very, very important, and it's going to have implications relative to where we're going with all of this. It's going to have very important implications. And it reads, and the mother of Jesus was there. So the mother of Jesus, what we must understand is that this, although we're seeing these as separate caricatures or separate characters, um, the mother, when you see the feminine element, we must syncretize this. And even Jesus, that character, we're going to have to look at this not in terms of gender, so much, but in terms of what these symbols represent, what they correspond to, relative to the ancient understanding of the symbols. A lot of times, Nasi, we get caught up in the modern interpretation of symbols, and
Yeah.
we get a very shallow uh, understanding and uh, a very dim picture of what was originally illustrated by these things. So this word Cana refers to a place of reeds, a place of reeds. And specifically, it refers to Kana, refers to the reed plant, which is a water plant specifically. And that reed plant or water plant is symbolized in other traditions as the lotus or the rosette, Rosette, the lotus or the rosette. Also, the sunflower. All right. These are very important. Kana also refers to a stream flowing into the Mediterranean Sea that marked the boundary between north above and south below. Now, think of this in terms of earthly terms as the horizon line. All right. The horizon line. And let's say you were looking out over the water, you were looking out over the sea. Okay. So when the sun rises, where does it look like it's coming from? Imagine that you're sitting on a dock and you're looking out over the sea, and you're witnessing the sunrise. From that standpoint, where does it look like the sun is rising from?
Out of the water.
Looks like it's rising out of the water. Fast forward 12 hours or so, and the sun is setting, and you're looking out over the waters. Where does it look like it's going? Under the water, correct?
The water, huh?
All right. Okay, follow me now. Follow me. in the east, talking about these symbols. In the east, the reed which sprouted from universal waters stands for manifestation and equates with the lotus. It is the earliest stalk or tree of ascent. The Babel builders knew it well. Stay with me now. The lotus flower, now this is this reed family, the sea of reeds, the radiant yellow center of the Egyptian blue lotus resembles the sun emanating from primeval waters. So it is talking about sunrise, all right? Sunrise, as told in the myth of creation. Now, what religious ceremony, family, is it is related to the sunrise, or it has a sunrise as a big part of the religious ceremony in Christianity? Don't we have sunrise service on Easter?
Easter, yeah,
All right.
Easter.
And it occurs on every Sunday, right? Easter always falls on a Sunday, correct?
Okay.
So follow with me now. This resembles the sun emanating from primeval waters, as told in the myth of creation. At night, the flower closes and sinks underwater, sunset. At dawn, it rises and opens again, sunrise. According to the Egyptian creation myth, it was the giant lotus which first rose out of the watery chaos at the beginning of time. From this giant lotus, the sun itself rose on the first day. That's why they call it Sunday, Rishon, correct?
You're right.
On the first day, Rishon. This is why Ishtar or Easter falls on Sunday every day. Both the blue and white varieties were used in medicinal purposes, in mathematics. The lotus hieroglyphs symbolize the number 1000, which we said is a multiple of 10, which is connected symbolically to the Christ. And he is the SON that is said to have risen on what? The third day, right? After the third day. And that's why we celebrate Easter in the Christian tradition. Are you all with me?
Yeah.
Okay.
It is also symbolic of Upper Egypt and represents the resurrection, not of Christ, but of the resurrection of Isis, a female figure. We get ready to talk about the inversion now, see.
Uh-huh.
The Old Testament story of Moses parting the Red Sea, or properly the Reed Sea, with the rod of God corresponds with the Egyptian ideas about the fields of reeds and the Jed pillar. As such, the story of the parting of the Red Sea is easily interpreted as an allegory for the opening of the field or dimension of the blessed. So we're talking about accessing blessings here, family. Accessing blessings. I want us to keep that in the forefront because we can get lost in the symbology. I want us to keep that in the forefront of our mind. in order to properly interpret this, I'm going to read from Hargrave Jennings again. It may be boldly asserted that there is not a religion that does not spring from the sexual distinction. All religions, whether they admit it or not, in modern times, the underlying subject is sexual union, whether physical, emotional, mental, energetic, spiritual. That is the underlying subject. There is not a form, an idea, a grace, a sentiment, a felicity in art, which is not owing in one form or another to phallicism and its means of indication, which at one time, family, in the monuments, statuesque, or architectural, covered the whole earth. So our forefathers were obsessed with the subject of sexual union. See, now see, that don't seem sacred to us.
Right. Be
That
fruitful and multiply,
that don't seem holy to us.
huh?
That don't seem righteous to us. But I guarantee you that is a part of psychological, perceptual, social engineering. All this has been ignored, averted from, or carefully concealed, together with the philosophy or the science that went with it, because it was judged at one point indecent. Indecent. As if anything seriously resting in nature, and being notoriously everything in nature and art, everything at least that is grand and beautiful, could be, apart from the mind making it so, indecent. So there is nothing indecent about this. The only thing that's telling you as we cover this that it's indecent is the profound programming that we all have undergone through psychological, perceptual, social engineering. Programming, Nasi, under the negative low frequency field of dominance.
Yeah, you can.
So as we go into this, I'm going to fast forward. We're going to get to a portion as we decode this that's going to lead us to John, the 6 chapters, verses 26 to 66. And you're going to, if you remember, you'll recall, now see that is the portion of scripture in the New Testament narrative in the allegory where Jesus is speaking to the Pharisees and the Sadducees and the people, and where he makes the statement that he is the bread of life.
Right.
And we'll get into that, but it ended up that once he explained all of this, that he was the bread of life, it says in verse 66, which is the end verse that we'll be stopping at look, it's John 6:6. It says, from that time, many of his disciples went back and walked no more with him. This is a controversial subject. And if you're still stuck in the old paradigm, under the influence of the old template family and the old pattern, you're going to have extreme difficulty with this. But I'm going to walk you through it. Still talking about the marriage ceremony at Cana when the water was turned into wine. We introduced you to a term called Hieros Gamos. And this is what the marriage ceremony in the New Testament allegory is based on. The term Hieros Gamos is used generally to refer to the sacred marriage between two divinities, or between a human being and mother and or Father God, or between two human beings. Under certain special conditions, the ultimate alchemy of forces which harmonize polar opposites, the ultimate alchemy of forces which harmonize polar opposites. This alchemy of forces, another word for that is sex. This alchemy of forces which harmonizes or brings together polar opposites. And opposites, family, energetic, again, emotional, physical, material, alchemical, psychological, mental. The union, or in the case of divinity, reunion of these forces, we simply term as sex. All right? Sex. Hieros Gamos, or hierogamy, that is holy marriage in Greek, is a sexual ritual that plays out a marriage between a god and a goddess. This is what was happening and occurring in the New Testament portion that we're covering in terms of the marriage ceremony of Cana. Especially when enacted in a symbolic ritual where human participants represent the deities. In Tantric Buddhism of Nepal, Bhutan, India, and Tibet, Yab Yum is a ritual of the male deity in union with the female deity as his consort. This is going to be very important. The symbolism is associated with the Anuttara Yoga Tantra, where the male figure, listen, embodies mercy or compassion along with skillful means, and the female partner, insight or wisdom. All right? That should put us in mind of Ion Sophia, the Pistis Sophia. And we're going to follow that narrative and review that narrative again because it's very important. Yab Yum is generally understood to represent the primordial or mystical union of wisdom and compassion, or passion, simply passion, wisdom and passion. Thus, in the Old Testament, Psalms 85:10, mercy and truth have met together. Righteousness and peace have kissed each other. Talking about this union, this alchemy of forces, harmonizing polar opposites, coming into harmony, coming into union or reuniting. And Genesis 4:1, and Adam knew Eve, his wife, she conceived and bare. This is the talking about family, not just of, about these allegorical characters, Adam and Eve, but talking about the energetic process of, and the alchemy, the alchemical science of harmonizing, joining, uniting polar opposites as complementary objects. This is the divine power of the universe. This is the divine power of the universe. Listen carefully. The transmutation of water into wine is powerfully symbolic. Firstly, we can safely assume that the very first miracle performed by Jesus, the central character of the New Testament biblical allegorical narrative, is of paramount importance and carries overarching symbolic significance. Second, it is hard to imagine, even within a merely allegorical setting, that a presumably righteous and awakened master like Jesus would provide an alcoholic beverage to partygoers simply for the sake of a good time. Thus, it is clear that this miracle represents something much higher. The ability of Christ, that is, the power of Christ, also known as Kuan Yin. I'm not even going to try to do that tongue twister, or Vishnu, to transform the water into wine. Listen, speaks of something much more significant, namely, this opening miracle of the New Testament allegory signifies the ancient practice of sacred sex, of the sacred sex act of the heroes Gamos. The ancient practice of the sacred sex act of the heroes Gamos. Sacred sex is the process of moving on or activating the primal waters of latent human sexual energy. Now remember, the very first act of divinity that we see, according to the biblical narrative in Genesis, the first chapter, is what? The Spirit moving on the waters. Are you all with me? The Spirit moving on the waters. We're going to decode this. This was a reference, a very direct reference, if you know ancient science. It's a very direct reference to sacred sex. And again, we said that sacred sex or sacred union is the process of moving on or activating the primal waters of latent human sexual energy and transmuting it into wine. That is, incrementally raising it, this sexual energy, via compassion and skill, knowledge, into higher, effervescent, and or intoxicating echelons of sexual pleasure and ecstasy, then utilizing that divine energy for spiritual illumination and divine creative manifestation. I'm going to read that again. Very important that we get this. Very important that we understand it. The entire Bible, New Testament, Old Testament, is based on this act, this concept of sacred sex or sacred union, uniting that which was separated, which was divided by way of the fall or the descent into the material realms. So once again, sacred sex is the process of moving on, that is, activating the primal waters of latent human sexual energy and transmuting it into wine. That is, incrementally raising it, this sexual energy, via passion or compassion and skill, knowledge, into higher, effervescent, and or intoxicating echelons of sexual pleasure and ecstasy, and then utilizing that divine energy for spiritual illumination and divine creative manifestation. Now, I'm going to pause here and ask, did everyone understand what I just read? The transmutation of water into wine is a very powerful symbolic metaphor, like we said. And we have to understand, we have to get a clear understanding of this before we're going to have an understanding of anything else relative to the marriage ceremony at Cana. We have to understand clearly what changing the water into wine represents. This opening miracle of the New Testament allegory is signifying the ancient practice of the sacred sex act of the hero Gamos. It is talking about an ancient sex act, all right? Changing the water to wine. Sacred sex, I'm getting ready to define what it is the process of moving on or activating the primal waters of latent human sexual energy. It means raising sexual energy. Does everybody know what that means?
Mm-hmm. Okay, so
Raising or activating sexual energy. Just to make it plain, is when, you know, a couple gets together and they have foreplay. All right? Just for a basic understanding. That is raising the sexual energy. Everybody get that? So we should understand that. We should understand that from a very basic level, but we're not just doing it for the sake of having sex.
right.
Using that energy and transforming it into wine. That is, incrementally raising it via compassion and skill. There are certain techniques, breathing techniques, certain techniques of caress, touching, all right, that raises the sexual energy into which is called water, which is referred to metaphorically as water, changing it into a higher energetic form that is effervescent and or intoxicating, and taking that what we translate as sexual pleasure and ecstasy and utilizing that energy for spiritual illumination and divine creative manifestation. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, shows.
All right. See, we've only been using the energy,
Yes.
to use a vulgar term, to get our rocks off, to get an orgasm. All right. But that was not the divine intention of that. And just to have reproductive sex in terms of reproducing another physical human being. No, that energy in and of itself, at its essence, is created. It's creative. Is divinely creative. Creating a human being, another human being, is just one of the aspects that energy, that divine creative energy can be used for. Does it make sense, family?
Okay, shows.
If you can create another human being, you can create anything.
Absolutely.
You can create a pile of money using that energy.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Isn't money called currency?
Right.
Currency,
Yes.
it means it's an energetic wavelength, an energetic
Mm-hmm.
frequency. You can create abundance. You can create
Mm-hmm.
blessings. You can create anything with that creative energy.
Solomon used it.
But we've been dumbed down to the point where we only think of it in terms of the physical and the material. So changing the water into wine means not just utilizing it as water, a basic
Mm-hmm.
element, but taking it and transforming it or elevating it beyond the physical, beyond the material. Is everyone with me?
Can you show us? And again, that's another element of alchemy.
That's absolutely correct. And this is where how we want to look at it.
Mm-hmm.
Sexual impulse is one of the most powerful spiritual forces that we know. You can't name another one. And it is centralized in each of our bodies. When channeled through the spiritual tree of life, you can achieve higher states of consciousness. How many people knew that?
I did.
I did.
Well, I mean, when y'all got together, didn't it feel like heaven?
Yeah.
Okay.
And we use them terms and we be calling God and all
Right.
that kind of stuff.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So we just gotta loosen up. We gotta loosen up.
Mm-hmm.
This perceptual engineering, scientific perceptual engineering has got us locked up. Hashem, actually Yahuwah, the so-called non-sacred name of God, commanded that the emotions and desire associated with sex should be used to seek the divine in a mystical, transcendental plane. Now, I this is what this particular writer has said. I have not seen that in the scriptures, but we'll just take his word for it. I haven't seen that. All throughout the scriptures, if he's talking about the biblical God, that sex is suppressed and is made sinful. And even when we get into the etymological words, we're going to see that the word sin, sin, is related to the woman and related to the woman's body, and in particular, the reproductive area of the woman's body. That is a Hebrew word, sin or sin. All right,
Mm-hmm.
but we'll just let that go. For too long, because he makes some good points, organized religion
Yes.
suppressed sex and made it something sinful. We've all been affected by that. We've all been
No doubt.
influenced by that to
Mm-hmm.
a greater or lesser degree. People who experience it, listen, without clerical approval or consent, that is what we term as marriage or
Mm-hmm.
matrimony, feel dirty and separated from the divine. Tell me that's not true.
Absolutely shows.
That's true.
It is time to transform our consciousness, to go beyond the veil and discover that Hashem created sex to give us a taste of the Garden of Eden. of the land of Canaan, of the promised land, of the field of the blessed, the field of reeds, the horn of plenty, nirvana. It corresponds to that. According to Kabbalah, desire is the core essence of a human being. It's hard to argue with that.
Tell me.
And the only thing that would argue with that simple fact is our religious programming. Under the negative low frequency field of dominance. We are made of desire. Tell me that's not true. We might want to appear a certain way in the temple or in the church or in public or in social settings or in cultural settings, but we know
Yes.
desire is part of the light.
Wow.
Desire fuels all human experience. You need only to look at art, literature, music, scientific discovery, and political revolution to see. Look, when I was coming up, I'm going to tell you, my desire, I had one desire, that's to play professional basketball. And I had women break up with me. I want y'all to hear me. It was a problem early on. I remember my first girlfriend. She knew that my love of basketball was a rival, and she was right. My first serious girlfriend. And she told me, it's either me or basketball. I'll tell you like this, I'm not with her, but I've been basketball all my life. From that point on, we wasn't together. That was a desire. I went to sleep thinking about it. You ask anybody in my family, I had my basketball with me at all times. You need only look at literature, art, music, scientific discovery, political revolution to see. Everything begins with the light of desire. Everything which yearns to be fulfilled. And even in Genesis, when you see that the Spirit moved on the waters, that's sex, family. That's sex. That's the first mention of sex in the Bible. There is no deeper conductor or more powerful spiritual expression than our desire for sex. It is our desire for wholeness.
Yes.
On an elemental level, that which was one, combined, genderless, androgynous energy split at one point. So the desire to unify on the physical aspect is sex. But it is fueled by a higher desire to return to what we were. Wholeness, singularity. Is everybody with me?
Okay.
Okay.
The essential Kabbalistic truth is so important that it is worth repeating. There is no deeper drive or more powerful spiritual expression than the desire for sex. And if you can't admit that, you front.
Right. Right. So you're lying to yourself.
You're lying to yourself.
Mm-hmm.
You lying to yourself.
Yep.
So let's look at this term good sex. All right? Good sex. Because in doing so, we're going to deal with family this scientific, perceptual, social engineering that we've all been affected on. And I thought, using this article, I thought that this individual expressed this very well. You can fill an entire library with modern sex manuals that instruct us how to have what they call good sex. Of course, knowledge and skill are important in lovemaking. And again,
Mm-hmm.
we go back to this sacred marriage, right? Or sacred sex.
Mm-hmm.
Follow me now. We go back to this. And this term karuna, in reference to the Yab Yum. The male figure embodies mercy and compassion or passion and skillful, knowledgeable means. So we're not saying that knowledge is not important, that skill is not important, but hear me. It is not knowledge of sex or knowledge of love making. It is knowledge of your feminine energy and aspect. Very
Mm-hmm.
important what I'm telling you now.
Mm-hmm.
Very
Come on,
important
Shows.
thing.
Yes. Yes.
When the scripture said, and Adam knew his wife, the only way he can know his wife is to have knowledge, complete knowledge of himself.
Mm-hmm.
We too dualistic in our thinking.
Mm-hmm.
And we think that knowledge and skill, family, from a male standpoint and even from a female standpoint, is something that you're going to whip on your mate, that you're going to put it on him or her. It's wrong-headed, dualistic,
Okay.
low
Yes.
frequency.
Yes. Can Shows.
And we think that is good sex when we experience and or cause a powerful orgasm. I'm telling you, that's not what we're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not the technique like that, really. Ba-
Teach Shows.
Basically, follow me, family.
Mm-hmm.
A good union, a good harmony from an energetic divine standpoint is a man knowing himself or his feminine aspect, and a female knowing her masculine aspect,
Mm-hmm.
and joining those two things in a skillful dance or rhythm or process or act. That's what I'm talking about.
Yes.
Whether an orgasm is the reward at the end or not, especially from the male standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
Just as we need the power of words, this is a correspondence, to express ideas adequately, we need knowledge and skill, he says, in the bed to express our passion. But
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to say we need knowledge and skill to properly raise that energetic level, to
Mm-hmm.
turn what? The water into wine, to turn a mere physical sex act into a cosmic creative experience.
Mm-hmm.
I know we haven't heard stuff like this before, but this is ancient science, family. This is ancient science. This is knowledge of redemption. This is knowledge of resurrection. This is knowledge of blessing. But how-to manuals and clinical studies, this is how it is approached, especially by the Euro Gentiles, Masters and Johnson. Clinical studies
Right.
include only what? One ingredient of the divine sexual recipe. Mastering the delicate and fine mechanics of sex is important, but it is just that, mechanics. We're not talking about this. We're not talking about simply mechanics. We're talking about the energetic nature. Mechanics
Mm-hmm.
have to do with the physical and the material only. Is it
Mm-hmm.
important? Yes, it is. But if you're a mechanic, what are you trying to build? What are you trying
Right.
to construct? What are you trying to repair? If it just relates to the physical, what are you trying to start? If it just relates to the physical, you fail. We're talking about performing a miracle, transmutating the mere waters of the physical aspect into what? Something higher, something more high frequency for a different creative purpose than just creating an orgasm, than just creating a baby. Than family just creating closer feelings for one another.
Mm-hmm.
That's human. All of it is good, and all of it is a result, could be a result, but we're not on that. I'm telling you, we're not on that.
Mm-hmm.
We're on something else. It is true that our bodies are complicated pieces of organic machinery. We want them to work well, but where are our souls? A man may well be adept in the art of sexual mechanics. We're not talking about this. Not for a man or a woman. And his lover may be able to accompany him at every turn. Not talking about this. But the seed of sexual pleasure is not purely physical.
Yes.
So when we talk about the fruit and the seed in the fruit, we're not talking about physical things. We're talking about another seed. We're not
Mm-hmm.
talking about semen and
Mm-hmm.
the egg. We're talking about planting a seed in the heavens,
Mm-hmm.
planting a seed in the high frequency realm of heaven so that our intent, family, our will in heaven will be what? Manifest in the earth.
On earth. Yes.
I'm going to pause here and ask if everyone understood what I just said. Again, very important. All right, moving forward. Most of the pop gurus, cool magazines, and sex therapists leave the ineffable human soul out of the sexual equation. They leave the soul, they leave our essence, the energetic nature, the divine nature of it out of the sexual equation. And, by extension, most of us have done that.
Mm-hmm.
It is the soul that animates rather our body. And that propels each of our actions. It is the energy of the soul that gives our lives greater meaning. If one wishes to repress this energy, which religion, our culture, our
Yes.
society, all of that was established under the low frequency negative field of dominance, told us to repress this energy, to partition it as something separate from sex. It can be done, but it pulsates and permeates rather our whole being with a deep desire to connect with someone. And that someone that you want to connect to is yourself.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
If you're a woman, the divine feminine aspect. I mean, the divine masculine aspect. And if you're a man, the divine feminine. According to Kabbalah, eroticism and mystical excitement. This is changing the water to wine. Write that down. Mystical excitement. Mystical excitement. We're not talking about exciting necessarily and exclusively the physical being, although that's part of it. What we want to uh, eventually ignite is the non-physical.
Mm-hmm.
Eroticism and mystical excitement begins at the intersection of our heads, our hearts, and our souls. When we are willing to expose our wholeness and focus on the emotional and spiritual aspects of our partners, loving someone like you love yourself,
Yes.
the feminine loving the masculine within them, and the masculine loving the feminine within them, as well as their physical attractiveness, sex can be deeply intimate. When we become aware of the spiritual purpose and cosmic role that gender plays in the grand scheme of things, we are full of discovery and spiritual energy. That's a very powerful statement.
Mm-hmm.
This is what we're focusing on. When you get your notes, we must focus in on this part and have this conception clearly in the forefront of our awareness, in the forefront of our consciousness. So we're clear, or we should be, on what changing water into wine is. If you're not that clear, or if you need more clarity, believe me, during the course of this dissertation, which is going to be in multiple parts, we're going to review that. We're going to review that, and when we get, especially when we get into the how-to aspect of it, when we're talking about how to apply this knowledge, technique, the ancient technique. All right,
Mm-hmm.
this is very important, family. So the ancient practice of the sacred sex act of the heroes Gamos. That was the is what underlies this allegorical story of the wedding of Cana in the New Testament, John the second chapter. What it was really referring to was the ancient practice of sacred sex, turning the water into wine, of the heroes Gamos. Sacred sex is the process, again, of moving on or activating the primal waters of latent human sexual energy and transmuting it, transforming it into wine. That is, incrementally raising it via compassion, skill, and knowledge into the higher, effervescent, and or intoxicating echelons of sexual pleasure and ecstasy. And then utilizing that divine energy for spiritual illumination and divine creative manifestation. Listen, this is all appropriate since the allegorical setting is the wedding feast. Now, the wedding feast of Cana is referring to the actual act of sacred sex that is tied into the hero's Gamos. That is a central portion of it. The wedding feast is the actual sexual act between man and woman. That is the god and the goddess, the god and the goddess. According to tradition and modern law, a marriage is consummated and or made legally valid only after the bride and groom have united sexually. According to tradition and modern law, a marriage is consummated and or made legally valid only after the bride and groom have united sexually. This is very important. Now, to further understand this turning the water into wine, to fully understand it, again, we have to go back and straighten some things out. And in doing that, everyone on this call should be familiar with the descent of the Ion Sophia. Am I correct?
Okay.
And how that relates to our emanation into
Okay.
the physical material realms and our fall into into human forms. And during that fall, we turned into physically opposing genders, men and women, male and female, masculine and feminine, from a physical aspect. A much more ancient tale of the Ion Sophia or Pistis Sophia is the tale of Inanna and her descent into the netherworld. This is the underlying, more ancient spiritual myth or tale of that fall, of that descent, of that devolution. But you're going to see that it has elements. And what I've done is provided you with a translation of this from the Sumerian Sanskrit. Inanna's descent to netherworld. Now, in hearing that word Inanna, it should be familiar to us. Anybody ever heard of the term Il Nana? Familiar with hip hop? Il Nana?
Yeah, that's the rapper
Foxy Brown.
Foxy Brown. Okay.
Do you know what that term is referring to?
If I'm not mistaken, and correct me, shows, isn't it sexually oriented?
That's correct. It says that she has a nice feminine organ.
Yes.
She has a nice feminine organ, that she is ill or nice or skilled in the sexual act.
Mm-hmm.
That term, nana or il nana, is derived from this figure, this ancient figure, Inanna. All right?
Mm-hmm. Okay.
When we hear the word punani,
Yes.
punani,
Poontang.
talking about the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
All right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to start by reading the first through the fifth verses. I'm going to skip to the 14th through the 19th verses and read all the way down to the 36th verse, then skip to the 164th verse to the 172nd, and read all the way to the 189th verse. All right. And I did this because a lot of things are repeated, and it's kind of like a chant, and I don't want to have all those repetitious things getting in the way with you um, really um, getting the flow of what is going on here. So Inanna's descent is the earlier, more ancient version of the Empress, the Priestess rather, or Ion Sophia. We're familiar with it. Just listen. From the great heaven, she, Inanna, set her mind on the great below. From the great heaven, the goddess set her mind on the great below. From the great heaven, Inanna set her mind on the great below. My mistress abandoned heaven, abandoned earth, and descended to the underworld. Inanna abandoned heaven, abandoned earth, and descended to the underworld. If you're taking notes, write down the word heaven, earth, and the underworld. Heaven, earth, and the underworld. She took the seven divine powers. Stop. What seven divine powers do you have bodily, family?
The chakras.
There you go. The chakras descended with her. She took the seven divine powers. She collected the divine powers and grasped them in her hand. With the good divine powers, she went on her way. She put a turban, headgear, a crown for the open country on her head. She took a wig for her forehead, third eye. She hung lapis lazuli beads around her neck, throat chakra. She placed twin egg shaped beads on her breast, heart chakra. She covered her body
Mm-hmm.
with the pala dress, the garment of ladyship. She placed mascara, listen, she placed mascara, which is called Let a Man Come, Let Him Come, on her eyes. She pulled the pectoral, which is called Come Man Come, over her breast. She placed a golden ring on her hand. She held lapis lazuli, measuring rod, and measuring line in her hand. The plummet line.
Mm-hmm.
The plummet line. Haven't we talked about this, family?
Yes.
All right. Inanna traveled towards the underworld. Her minister, Ninkaburu, traveled behind her. This is very important. Holy Inanna said to Ninkaburu, Come, my faithful minister of Iana. My minister, listen, who speaks fair words, my escort, who speaks trustworthy words. I am going to give you instructions. My instructions must be followed. I am going to say something to you. It must be observed. This is not happening anywhere but within ourselves. On this day, I will descend to the underworld. When I have arrived in the underworld, make a lament for me on the ruined mounds. Beat the drum for my sanctuary, for the sanctuary. Make the rounds of the houses of the gods for me. Are y'all at home, gods?
Absolutely.
After she had couched down and her clothes were removed, they were carried away. She's totally stripped. She made her sister, Erikgala, rise from her throne and instead sat on her throne, the throne of the underworld. Now, in terms of the divine Miss Aretha Franklin represented her sister, Erikgala, the queen of the underworld, the queen of soul, Sole, the natural woman. Are you all with me?
Okay.
And the divinity tried to sit on that throne. But Aruna, the 7 judges, rendered their decision against her. They looked at her. Listen, it was the look of death. They spoke to her. It was the speech of anger. They shouted at her. It was the shout of heavy guilt. And what they had told her previously, look, don't bring those divine rules of heaven down here. Leave all that stuff at the gates of hell, the 7 gates of hell. And you must adopt the rules now of the lower realm. And you're not going to sit in the divine seat of royalty. We're going to take your crown and cause you to do what? Sit in the dust. Is everyone with me?
Yes.
Okay.
They looked at her, it was the look of death. They spoke to her, it was the speech of anger. They shouted at her, it was the shout of heavy guilt. The afflicted woman was turned into a corpse, and the corpse was hung on a hook. Listen, family, after 3 days and 3 nights, I'm going to stop there. Who is that talking about? Who do you know was stripped of their clothes and hung up?
Jesus.
Yeshua.
This is the original story. This is the original story that myth is based on. Wasn't about no man. It was about the fall of the divine feminine. What about no man that lived 2,000 years ago? Now, these seem like separate characters, but family, they're all the same characters. All right? They're all one. After 3 days, her minister or messenger, Ninkubura, her minister who speaks fair words, her escort who speaks trustworthy words, carried out the instructions of her mistress, did not forget her orders, and did not neglect her instructions. She made a lament for her in her ruined houses. She beat the drum for her in the sanctuaries. She made the rounds of the houses of the gods for her. She lacerated her eyes for her. She lacerated her nose. In private, she lacerated her buttocks for her. Like a pauper, she clothed herself in a single garment, and all alone she set her foot to the Ekur, the house of Enlil. When she had entered the Ekur, the house of Enlil, she lamented before Enlil, Father Enlil, don't let anyone kill your daughter in the underworld. Don't let your precious metal be alloyed with the dirt of the underworld. Don't let your precious lapis lazuli be split there with the mason's stone. Don't let your boxwood be chopped up there with the carpenter's wood. Don't let young lady Inanna be killed in the underworld. So this is the underlying tale, ancient tale of Jesus in the New Testament, being hung on, stripped of his clothes, afflicted, and hung up not on a hook, but hung up on a cross, right? On a tree. And after 3 days and 3 nights, rising up. He had the scripture says he had the power to lay down his life. He had the power to lift it up again. Sophia, Inanna, had the power to descend, and guess what? Has the power to ascend. But these are, look, just aspects of us, aspects of the divine feminine energy within us.
Yes.
During the descent, during the inversion, what was male was made female, or what was female was made male. Are you all with me? So this is the story now. Let's go a little bit further. We said that the descent of Inanna in the Sumerian tale, the ancient Sumerian tale, was the same tale of the Gnostic myth of Ion Sophia, her descent into matter. All right? Now remember, we said that water does what? Seeks its lowest point in order to what? Enact its greatest power.
Yes.
Now let's go to the scriptures now, keeping in mind that this Jesus character that you see in the New Testament is actually a form of the divine feminine, a form, an abstraction of the divine feminine. Listen carefully. 1 John 5, 7, and 8. For there are 3 that bear record where? In heaven. See, we talking about family bringing these blessings from heaven to earth. Planting a seed in heaven and having
Yes.
it grow on earth. Sex has only involved planting a seed on earth and having it what? Grow on earth. but we're trying to reach the divine here. There are three that bear record in heaven: the Father, the Word, and the Holy Ghost. Understand this, that these three are one. You got to come from a position of wholeness, family, a
Yes.
perception of wholeness at all times. This is
Mm-hmm.
what this is what this particular lesson is designed to do, to get you to think in holistic terms, and to view things from the standpoint of singularity. That is the divine perception. And there are three that bear witness in the earth. Listen: the spirit, the water,
Mm-hmm.
and what? The blood. Now, what is the blood of the vine? What is it called? The blood of the vine, or the blood of the grape?
Wine.
What?
Wine. So we
Mm-hmm.
have here the spirit,
Mm-hmm.
the water, and the wine.
Mm-hmm.
These three, family, agree in one.
Mm-hmm.
Well, who is that one that all of these three things agree in? We're going to find out it can't be a man.
Mm-hmm.
Ain't no way. Let's go forward. For as much as ye know that ye were not redeemed with corruptible things, as silver and gold. We know that. From your vain conversation, way of life, received not seek by the tradition from your fathers.
Right.
That's the old paradigm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's our ancestors warning us that in order to understand and comprehend correctly what we're going to say next, you cannot bring any of that old paradigm nonsense with you.
Yes.
But you were redeemed with the precious blood of Christ. We're going to find out what this is. As of a lamb without blemish and without spot. You have to think of yourself, your body, as that way, as being holy. You cannot have any thoughts, family, that anything that has to do with your body is nasty,
Yes.
is
Mm-hmm.
taboo. Once you start feeling that way, now see, we know it's going to be a result of the influence of the old paradigm, of the influence of programming,
That's right.
social engineering, without blemish, without spot, who verily, listen, was foreordained before the foundation of the world, but was manifest, is being manifest in these last times for you. Remember, the book was sealed, now see.
Yes.
Absolutely
So
right.
whatever was said of this Redeemer, of this Resurrector, is null and void. It was under the old paradigm, under the old
Right.
pattern, under the old template,
The old covenant.
the old covenant. Follow me
Right.
now. But one of the soldiers with a spear pierced his side, and forthwith there came out blood and water. Where was Eve created from according to the biblical narrative?
Rib.
Is that on your side?
Mm-hmm.
So they telling you that there's a deeper understanding
Mm-hmm.
of this blood and
Yes.
water gushing out of the side of Jesus. Don't
Mm-hmm.
got nothing to do with no man.
Mm-hmm.
It has to do allegorically with what came out of the side of man, according to the allegory. This gonna all make sense. Now here is the central scripture. And they shall take of the blood.
Yes.
Listen, strike it to the side posts. Write the word. Write the word side posts.
Right.
Go on, Eitai. Go on, go on. This is a testimony that there's no way for you to understand it except you from a holistic point of view.
Yes. Yes.
Any other way,
Yes.
you're just not going to get it. What's the side post got to do with the blood coming out?
Yes.
Here we go. The upper doorposts of the houses now, and it says, "They wherein they shall eat it, shall eat it." Follow me, family.
Come
Follow
on,
me,
show.
because this is something that has been hidden, well
Yes.
Yes,
concealed
it's been hidden.
by our forefathers. But I'm going to show you the ancient symbology of this. We went over it yesterday when we talked
Yes.
about these posts.
Yes. Hmm.
Now watch. We'll just go and we'll look at just one representation, and that is this one, the ancient Egyptian.
Mm-hmm.
Do y'all see the middle pillar here,
Mm-hmm.
the Jinn
Okay.
pillar? Do y'all see the two side pillars?
Mm-hmm.
Do those look like men?
Come on, show.
Come on now. We gotta stick to the more ancient meaning of these symbols, or we're gonna be fooled now. See, we're gonna continue to be tricked,
Yes, sir.
and
Yes, sir.
we're not gonna find no redemption. We're not
None.
gonna find no resurrection. We will
Nope.
not enter the promised land. We won't know how to do it because
Mm-mm.
we have not converted our instructions that were
Yes.
inverted.
Eitai, that's why the brother Lanza said any overarching unity of consciousness is not only difficult but impossible with dualistic language.
That's correct.
Mm-hmm.
That ain't gonna happen. Ain't no unity of consciousness
So
in the dualistic language.
you shall take of the blood, strike it on the two side posts, the upper doorpost of the houses wherein they shall eat it. This aspect of eating this is going to be a problem, family, and our understanding of exactly what that means. Ain't talking about no Passover feast like we understood it under
Come
the
on,
old
show.
covenant, under the old template,
Mm-hmm.
nothing like that. Follow me. Now we're gonna go eventually to John 6:26 through 66. But I'm gonna show you that when we get to the end, because Yeshua was talking about that he was the bread of heaven. We'll read it,
Right.
we'll read it briefly into the narrative because I'm gonna show you exactly what this is talking about according to the ancient tradition. I'm sorry, this is John the what did I say? This John the 6th chapter, 26.
Right.
Did I say that?
That's what you said, 26.
Okay, John 6:26. We'll just read down into it a little bit because I want to give you all the context of this, and our ancestors were telling us through this narrative, through this allegorical narrative, and I see how difficult it would be for people to accept what I'm getting ready to say. Jesus answered them, and said, Verily, verily, I say unto you, ye seek me not because ye saw the miracles. You didn't understand the miracles. You didn't,
Mm-hmm.
you didn't even understand my first miracle of turning the water into wine.
Wow. Mm-hmm.
Many of us until today didn't really understand that, never comprehended it, what it was
No.
talking about. Not because ye saw the miracles, but because ye did eat the loaves of bread and were filled physically.
Mm-hmm.
Follow me, y'all. Verse 27, labor not for the meat which perisheth, but for the meat which endureth unto everlasting life, which the Son of Man shall give unto you. For him hath God the Father sealed. Then said they unto him, What shall ye do that we might work the works of God? This is what I'm teaching you, how to do it. Is it in context, family?
Yes.
This is the
Okay.
subject that he is getting ready to what? Talk on. We'll read a little bit more into this. They said before him, Jesus answered and said, This is the work of God, that ye believe on him whom he hath sent. They said therefore unto him, What sign showest thou then,
Mm-hmm.
that we may see and believe thee? What dost thou work? Our fathers, listen, did eat the manna in the desert, as it is written, he gave them bread from heaven to eat. Remember now, take the blood, strike it on the two side posts, the upper door post of the house, wherein they shall eat it. Subject is eating, correct?
Mm-hmm. Come on.
Our fathers did eat the manna in the desert, as it is written. He gave them bread from heaven to eat. Then Jesus said unto him, Verily, verily, I say unto you, Moses gave you not that bread from heaven. Old covenant, now see,
That's right.
old paradigm, old tradition, old pattern. But my Father giveth you the true bread from heaven. For the bread of God is he which cometh down from heaven. Actually, that should be she.
Yes.
And giveth life unto the world. Ain't no man can do that on his own.
Mm-hmm.
The
Mm-hmm.
life giver is and has been and always will be the woman.
Yes.
Then said they unto him, Lord, evermore give us this bread. And Jesus said unto him, I am the bread of life. He that cometh to me shall never hunger. He that believeth on me shall never what? Thirst.
Thirst.
So we know that this bread of heaven that Jesus is talking about in the allegorical narrative is later coupled with the wine of his blood, right?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Come on now. Come on. Follow
Mm-hmm.
me, family. Is everybody with me so far?
Yes.
Absolutely sure.
Right.
Let's look at this in the ancient context. The etymology of the name of the goddess Nana is debated. Some scholars have proposed that the name may derive from a Babel word, meaning how a child says it, Nana, meaning mother. Scholar Jan Vandervries connects the name Nana to the root na, meaning the daring one, the daring one. Lindau theorizes that a common noun may have existed in Old Norse, Nana, that roughly meant woman. Now, woman family means womb man.
Right.
It's referring to the womb. So all of these are right. Scholar John McKinnell notes that the mother and nam derivations may not be distinct. That's what I'm saying. Commenting, Nana may have meant she who empowers, she whom empowers, who gives life. And where does the woman give life through? Come on now. The Nana, the Purana, the Punani.
Right.
Follow me, family.
Come
Follow.
on, shows.
The knot of Inanna is a stylized bundle of reeds. Remember the field of reeds,
Mm-hmm.
the place of the field of blessing, an emblem of the Babylonian goddess Inanna. Remember, we started out, Cana, Nasi, means reed.
Right. Right.
The wedding of Cana. Cana means reed or place of reeds or water plant or lotus or rosette. And it means, listen, to get, acquire, create, buy, possess your blessing of God originating, creating, redeeming his people, of Eve acquiring knowledge or wisdom. Is it all tying together, family? Come on now.
Absolutely, shows.
You got to see it. It's all wrapped up in here. I told you that this one, the first verse was pregnant with meaning. And I want us to, I'm not saying excuse the pun. I'm including
Right.
the pun
Mm-hmm.
because we trying to get pregnant and produce something. Not on
Yes.
a physical plane, but on a energetic plane. Follow with me now. The knot of Inanna is a stylized bundle of reeds. There it is. The two knots called the knot of Inanna, right there in the picture. Everybody see it.
Yeah. Okay.
Follow. This symbol was the early written form of the name of the goddess, whose name was composed of two characters. Listen, Nasi, the post, signpost, and the ring of rushes, or the ring of reeds. It is related to the Tayet knot of Isis. This is so important. As a symbol of divine authority. It is the ancestor of the crozier. See, we thought these were male symbols.
Right.
The staff, the rod. Oh no,
Mm-hmm.
a
Mm-hmm.
staff carried by the Catholic bishops. And we
Mm-hmm.
know that the Catholic bishops, they worship Mary right
They
along.
were
Yes.
right.
Yes.
Matter of fact,
Yes.
the highest, most revered icon or symbol of Catholicism is the Black Madonna.
Yes.
Black Madonna.
Absolutely. And that's a fact.
And we're gonna go into detail on exactly what that is representing. It's time to take our stuff back, family. They
Come on,
know
Shows.
they
Absolutely.
they
Yes.
know they know us. Look, let me show y'all something relative to this, the rise of this feminine energy. I can't remember who put this up, but I said I was going to show it to y'all because it's very powerful, and it shows you, especially what these Europeans, especially these Americans, are deathly afraid of, and we got to take this back. We have to come into possession and repossess our stuff, family. This was posted yesterday. Let me see. Let me find it. Oh, here it is. Somebody posted this yesterday, and this is so it's kind of funny, but if you really look at it, I want you all to listen very carefully to what this minister is saying, because this is a reality in America today, family.
He was facing witchcraft.
Hold on.
Well,
This is a evangelical minister. He's talking about Donald Trump. It says non-political pastor John A. Kilpatrick speaks in tongues to protect Trump from witchcraft. They know this divine feminine is coming.
They know it's coming.
They know
It's
it's
here.
listen very closely to this fool.
when Elijah faced Jezebel, he was facing witchcraft. And what's happening right now in America is witchcraft's trying to take this country over. I'm not being political, but I don't see how President Trump bears up under it. He's as strong as I have ever seen a man be. But here's what the Holy Spirit said to me last night, and here's what he said for me to tell you. He said, tell the church that so far Trump has been dealing with Ahab.
He's been dealing with the physical, with the masculine,
With the masculine, right?
divine
Mm-hmm.
masculine. Listen,
Jezebel's fixing to step out from the shadows.
divine feminine finna step out from the shadows, y'all.
Yes.
They know
Yes.
this.
Yes.
They sense this in their soul.
Mm-hmm.
That's what the Lord said to me. There's about to be a shift, and the deep state is about to manifest, and it's going to be a showdown like you can't believe. It's time to pray for the president.
There they go.
Ah.
No power.
None.
No power.
Mm-mm.
Whatsoever.
So y'all heard that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What they
Okay.
fear the most is the rise of this divine feminine and the knowledge of this.
Yes.
The knowledge of this. Let's go on now. Let's move forward. Talking about this bread of life. Talking about this bread of life. So it said that this that's knot of Inanna is related to the Tayat knot of Isis. We're gonna find out how significant all this is, family, and how it all ties together perfectly. This middle character is the Tayat knot. All right,
Mm-hmm.
do y'all see it?
Okay.
These are related images to that are to the right and the left of it. Now remember, this one image is the Jed pillar,
Yes.
and You might have thought that that was a masculine image, but it's feminine.
Yeah.
You see it? It's right there. The Jed pillar.
Mm-hmm.
Those are
Mm-hmm.
three women,
Mm-hmm.
and the feminine energy. That's an indication that those three agree in one, and the one is the woman, the womb man.
Mm-hmm.
Y'all got to hear me now.
Yes. Yes.
We're gonna go on to prove this. The other is the Ankh, and
Mm-hmm.
it's simply the Tayat knot with the, just imagine if you tied a bow or a bow tie, just with the arms extended
Mm-hmm.
and not drooping down like this. It says resembling the Ankh with bent arms, the Tayat or girdle of Isis is found mainly in Egyptian funerary murals. It most likely represents, listen, the flow of menstrual blood from the womb of the goddess. That is the divinity in her physical aspect or manifestation. Y'all got to hear this now.
Mm-hmm.
And its magical properties. It has magical properties.
Yes.
The garments of Egyptian gods are frequently depicted with belts in such a configuration. The power of the Tayat is described in a spell in the Papyrus of Ani. Now, see, this is going to be related to the scriptures that talk about the power of the blood. The life is in the blood, the
Yes.
power of the blood. What happens?
Mm-hmm.
What is happening when a woman menstruates? Why is that blood flowing? Wow, if we don't know, we better find out. Somebody tell me the science of that. Not today, but tomorrow. Make that the assignment. Find out why a woman menstruates. Continuing on. The blood of Isis, the blood of Jesus.
It's
Hold
the
on,
older
hold on,
blood
hold on.
being put
Make it,
out for the new.
Make it your assignment. I'm going on. The blood of Isis or the blood of Jesus. Are y'all with me?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Or the blood of the Lamb, Old Testament and New, that was put on what? The side post and the uppermost post. The spells of Isis, the magical words of Isis, shall keep this great shining one strong and shall protect. Stop, pause. When they put the blood on the doorpost and lintels, were they trying to protect themselves
Mm-hmm.
from what?
The death angel.
Uh-huh. See, we're going to know why Yeshua said your fathers ate the bread
Mm-hmm.
and died, right?
Okay.
This is powerful, family.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
No religious connotations, nothing related to the old paradigm,
Yes.
and shall protect him from whosoever would harm him to do such things as he abominateth. Hard word to say. Are y'all seeing the connection of putting the doorpost on the lintels?
Okay.
of the upper post, the side post.
Yes.
Are y'all seeing it?
Mm-hmm.
It was a protection. It had nothing to do with no blood of the lamb, Nasik, or no Old Testament tradition.
Anytime.
It was reflective of a much earlier tradition. And the power of the blood was always, and the life being in the blood, and the redemption of the blood was always in the divine feminine. Always. Continuing on now, the knot resembles an ancient charm for menstrual cramps, which would involve insertion of a knotted cloth to stanch bleeding. The tiad is also known as the buckle of Isis. The buckle of Isis. Don't have nothing to do with Jesus. Don't have nothing to do with no sacrificial lamb like that, family.
Right.
Those things, Nasik, are examples and shadows. Isn't that what we read?
That's what we read.
Examples and shadows. Continuing on. The image of Mary Magdalene wearing a similar girdle, possibly hinting at some special symbolism. They don't know. And there she's got the Tayat belt on, the belt of Isis.
Mm-hmm.
So understand that all of this, like what we said before, in art and sculptures and art, that this idea of sexuality, masculine and feminine, but most predominantly feminine sexuality, was
Mm-hmm.
always reflected in art, always reflected in the symbols. Here we go. In modern times, evidence of the initiatory thread or knot can be observed among Christians in Syria. Listen, who baked knotted rolls. That's bread, ain't it?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
To be eaten once a year on Easter morning. That's Sunday. That's the sunrise service,
Mm-hmm.
family. And they're called hot cross buns.
Yes. Yes.
Do you know what those hot cross buns have in them? What the ingredients are?
No.
Let's look together. You know why? Because I'm not so sure, but I think I'm right. I think I'm right. Y'all see them raisins in them?
Okay. Mm-hmm.
What are raisins?
Grapes.
Take
Dried up.
take ye eat. The bread is my body. The blood is the wine.
Wine. Yes.
The body is the
Got
bread. The blood is the wine. Do y'all see this?
you. Yes. Got you. Mm-hmm.
It don't have nothing to do with Jesus, family. They used to bake these knotted rolls, and which have become the hot cross buns now, to be
Mm-hmm.
eaten once a year on Easter morning at the sunrise service. That is not seek the reed or the sun or the sun rising from the underworld.
Right.
That is the divine feminine energy, Inanna, in her descent from the underworld after 3 days and 3 nights rising again.
Mm-hmm.
Ain't got nothing to do with no male gender. Has to do with the feminine. Not in the allegory, but in wholeness, it has to do with both. I'm going to show you
Yeah.
how. All right. thus equating the labyrinthine knot with the bread of life and the resurrection of the soul. Are y'all hearing this?
Mm-hmm.
The braided Sabbath loaf or Berkischbrot of the German Jews evidently has its origin in the ancient goddess rites. We know that the Teutonic goddess of fertility, Teutonic means German, Berkta or Perkta, was worshipped by the women with rites which included offering their hair to her. In time, this ceremony became obsolete and was replaced by a symbolic offering of the hair in the shape of a loaf representing intertwined braids. Where have y'all seen that before? I'm going to show you. Does that look like braided hair?
Yes. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Intertwined braid?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's all connected, family.
Yes.
We just got to get free from this old paradigm. Continue on before we close. Hebrew scholars, have offered alternative suggestions as to the derivation of the Berkish brod. As for example, that the name Berchesh stems from the Old High German Berchit, which also describes the loaf known as Brezel. In any event, the pretzel too is baked
Mm-hmm.
in the same form of a loose triple knot and was probably in early times an offering made for a festival in Berkta's honor. Thank you, Hebrew scholars. On the right, the knotted reed bundle, standard and ideogram of the goddess Inanna, Sumer, circa 4th millennial before the Common Era, and then the sacred knot of the Minoan goddess Ariadne, Knossos, Bronze Age, early 1550 BCE. So these all predate Christianity.
Mm-hmm.
So, family, when we are looking at the New Testament character of Jesus or Yeshua, whatever you want to call it, we're talking about the divine feminine energy. The Christ energy is the feminine aspect from an energetic standpoint. Again, this is central because when we're talking about the wedding feast of Cana,
Yes.
again, we're talking about exciting or igniting or activating divine feminine energy, both in the male gender, the brothers, and the
Mm-hmm.
feminine gender, the sisters. Are you all with me?
Yes,
Mm-hmm.
sir.
Mm-hmm.
Male aspect, Nasi, is always initiative. All right? Always active in the activation. The feminine energy is always that which activates and then from nekeva, that which pierces
Yes.
into the cosmic, pierces into the non-physical, into heaven,
Mm-hmm.
out of the grave, out of the underworld. But in the going back as we close, in the narrative, the allegory, the myth of Inanna, she knew a man would have to come. So it says here in verses 20 through 25, she had taken the divine powers, 7 divine powers with her, which are the 7 primary chakras of the body, placed the twin egg-shaped beads on her breast, uh, representing at this point the heart chakra, the twin egg-shaped beads. And we're going to talk about the shape that those twin egg-shaped beads make. Now, see, they make a bow
Mm-hmm.
on her breast. Uh,
Uh,
and the bow is related to the heart. Cupid
Yes.
carrying the bow. We're going to talk about this because the method of activation, the method of activation is hidden within these symbols. Trust me, family. She covered her body with a pala dress, the garment of ladyship, and placed the golden ring on her hand. And she held the lapis lazuli measuring rod, the plummet, family, the plummet,
Mm-hmm.
indicating that there will be a timeline associated with the descent. We've talked about this before. And the name of the mascara that she was wearing was Let a Man Come. Let him come. And she pulled the pectoral, which is called Come Man Come. So the man knowing, again, that the masculine energy activates the feminine and vice versa. But in the fall, Nasi, it would be the
yeah.
masculine that would have to initiate this. This all has to do with the process or the practice of sacred sex, the sacred sex ritual, the sacred sex ritual, family.
So we see the inversion, huh?
You see the inversion. But our ancestors laid this out in a way that we can understand it. So I want to close with this again, so that we understand exactly where we're going. The ancient practice of the sacred sex act of the Heroes Gamos. Now, that is what the marriage at Canaan in the New Testament narrative is based upon. The sacred sex act of the Heroes Gamos. Sacred sex is the process of moving on or activating the primal waters. We saw that, Nasik, again in Genesis, the first chapter.
Right.
This underlies the entire biblical narrative. I can prove it beyond a shadow of a doubt.
Mm-hmm.
It's talking about moving or activating the primal waters of latent human sexual energy, in specific, the feminine sexual energy, and transmuting it or transforming it into wine, taking it to a higher frequency.
Yes.
That is by incrementally raising it via compassion and skill and knowledge, not knowledge of the feminine body or nothing like that. Knowledge, that's included, but knowledge of the feminine aspect of yourself. We're going to
Mm-hmm.
talk about empathy. We're going to talk about empathy in the future, but we're laying the groundwork for this very carefully, transmuting it into wine by incrementally raising it via compassion and skill and knowledge into the higher effervescent rather, and or intoxicating echelons of sexual pleasure and ecstasy, and then utilizing that divine energy for spiritual illumination and divine creative manifestation. We're not trying to plant a seed, brothers, in the body
Right.
of a woman. We're trying
Right.
to, through a alchemical process,
Mm-hmm.
endeavoring to plant a seed in heaven
Mm-hmm.
so that the windows of heaven can be opened up and our will or our intent that is in heaven will be will correspond to the earth. Does that make
Yes.
sense?
Absolutely, shows.
Does that make sense? So
Mm-hmm.
this is our divine science, divine alchemical science, family. We're laying the groundwork. We're laying the groundwork so that when we get into the instructional portion of this, you all will be experts. You all will be experts. And whatever you ask for, whatever you request, whatever your intent is, it will manifest. It will manifest. So, uh, the ancients family talked about in terms of the fields of reeds, the jed pillar, the opening of the field or the dimension of the blessed. In the scriptures, it talks about going into the promised land. How did they
Mm-hmm.
have to go into the promised land? They had to cross the water, didn't it?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
All
The
throughout the
reed,
scriptures.
the
All
reed sea.
throughout the scriptures. So this is the fundamentals, family. And moving forward, we will be getting into more and more detail and going higher and higher relative to our understanding of these things. So at that point, I'm going to end it right here, open it up for questions and comments.